Hello, I want to make a video about my beliefs, religious beliefs, and how they pertain to Islam and the Quran, because I think that it might interest people. My beliefs might be different, might be similar to other Muslim people, and they might be similar to Christian or Jewish people, and I'll try to describe them in common terms, and they might be similar to even other people who don't maybe associate themselves with any of that stuff. So my background is I am from Chile, from South America. I grew up Catholic, and I lost my faith when I was a kid. I was just rebellious and questioned things a lot, and then went through a lot of problems, and I was agnostic atheist, something like that. And then started reading the Bible when I was sent away, and then I started getting interested in the Bible and reading it. I learned about Arabic calligraphy because I had learned about Judaism before, and I really thought that was interesting. And I met someone from Saudi Arabia who gave me calligraphy books. And so eventually, they never really talked to me about Islam. They just showed me kindness. And I appreciated that. It's something difficult, I find, to just be nice to someone and never talk to them about religion, but just like live the religion. So I really admire that. And so I ended up studying it, and I just realized that it makes sense to me. And I'll be honest, I don't really believe in it, that any organized religion today is without flaw. That's just the way humans are. And you'll listen to one person and you'll figure out, all the things they say are right, and then you'll find maybe something is maybe wrong about it to you, and you'll listen to someone else and you'll find that maybe they speak different, maybe they don't speak that well, but they say something very true. So that to me is sort of how it is, and it's hard for me to be so concise, and that's another reason why the Quran, I think, is really miraculous, is because it is very concise in many different parts. And it's also miraculous because it just has a lot of ancient information, and I think that's the part that I like about it, is I like to think about things anthropologically, and when I look at these religions that came from that part of the world, and I begin to look at Islam, it seems like it's the missing part. And it's very curious to me how Islam is often described as coming later than Christianity. But the information that is described in the Quran is very ancient information, and from what I've read and seen, the details corroborate with, the narratives, that the Jewish people wrote in the Torah. So to me, the Quran and the Torah are similar, because they talk about how to conduct society. They talk about ancient narratives, one from the Torah, from the perspective of the people, the Israelites, who were originally Mesopotamians, left to Egypt, assimilated, and then went into what were enslaved, suffered a lot, and then went to, the area of the world that is called now Israel or Palestine, Canaan, that was also called that, and they settled down. But they weren't the only ones, and it says that in the Torah. I don't know the narratives too well, but I know that Moses married Zipporah, and there's a lot of articles on the Torah.com website, Torah.com, that talk about the connection between Moses and these nomadic tribes, and they call them Arab because of that, because they were nomadic. It's like when we use the word Bedouin. And through sort of fateful history, the outsiders ended up becoming, organizing and began to reveal things and put together things and became now part of the centralized religion. And so there was the sedentary people, and then the people who traveled around. And to me, it's also very important that this happened after Jesus, because if it had happened before Jesus, then that would have caused a huge divide, because I think it would have been a huge test of faith to not have that important prophet in the canon, in the scripture of the Quran, which was recited and continues to be recited, and that's what makes it so unique. Has different aspect to it, and in that way it's similar to other cultures in the world. That also explains some of the point of contention, because there are some parts of the Quran that criticize Jewish people, but when I study it, I find that it's not the same as, the criticisms we see in Europe against Jewish people, because in Europe, a lot of the Christian people, they had narratives about, Judas betraying Jesus, and these people looked different. They were from the Middle East. They were seen as foreigners. Whereas I think in the context of that place in the Quran, the conflict was between organized religion and non-organized religion. And so there was believers, people who believed the same thing, but they behaved differently. And also it had to do with systems of faith, systems of belief. And so sometimes those things don't get translated. It'll say, something about Jewish people, but it really is saying, the Jewish faith, the faith of Judea. It was a place and a people, and that faith and that people spread, and its center was Jerusalem, but all these other believers were also part of that, and they also prayed to Jerusalem because they worshiped the same thing. And so the Christians fit in to me because Jesus, there's a lot of contention about the details of the identity of Jesus. But if we read the scriptures, I think the amount of evidence shows that much of what Muslims say fits in to what the Gospels say. For example, there's a verse in Mark that I covered in another video where Jesus himself calls himself a prophet when saying that a prophet is not. And that word prophet is it's difficult because it's because we associate it with like this type of person historically, yet it's really a Greek word that has a very sort of generic kind of meaning of speaking out, someone who speaks out, much like an activist. Today, when we think of activists, and that's why it's important to listen to activists, because they're telling us things about our world, and if we don't listen, then we will be destroyed. But some activists don't have the right message, and their message is bringing fear. It's not bringing hope. It's bringing division. It's bringing and so these are all people in the history of this part of the world that were teaching important things. And if you study the Torah, when I studied the Torah, I started to find that a lot of the things that Jesus taught are in it. For example, in the creation story, the creation narrative, you have 7 days, 7 time periods, and people will argue about the details to prove a point. But on the 7th day is when people rest, and so it's also when the Creator rests. So that's the first illusion. There's a second illusion that it says that we are made in the image of the Creator. And the word for this Creator in the Torah is Elohim. And in other parts it just appears as Elo or Allah. So that's very similar to Allah. Yet Jesus wanted to include other people. He didn't want to segregate and separate people away. He was for his people, I think. He didn't abandon his people. He spent time with his people. Those were his people. But he didn't exclude the others, the outsiders. And I think his followers continued in that tradition to the point where many outsiders are now part of this tradition, and we don't have maybe a very strong connection to that part of the world, but our cultures were made from that. The Bible developed a lot of language. It developed a lot of scripture, and so it's part of our history. And thank goodness, because the story of Jesus reveals something important about religion. It reveals conflict about organized religion, and so another example from the Torah of some of Jesus' teachings in the Gospels are that you have names of people that have El in them. Rachel, Israel. That's also a name that appears in the Quran, Israel. And it says sons of Israel. So that's indicating a lineage, because the Quran went back and is confirming, the original faith that that the idea of God being a father is metaphorical. That God is not a father to us. So when they say, not literally, no one is because of the way that was being used, what it was different than what it was traditionally. And so this metaphor that also appears in the Tanakh, in the later writings, this metaphor, was popularized, and it seemed to have played an important role in saying that the patriarchs of society can't call themselves fathers. That's a role of this use of this metaphor that is not often talked about. And it occurred here in this part of the world. In northern Wisconsin, the King of France used to call himself father to the Native American subjects. And we see that too but I won't get into that because I don't want to split hairs, but let's think about, how many different patriarchs we have and all these different people who call themselves fathers, even though the Bible says otherwise. And that just goes to show you the reality of religion. Not everyone's following everything that the book says. So the most important part for me are the simple things. And what the Quran has to say, the simplest message of the Quran, in my opinion, is the clear proof. And the clear proof is repeated often. It's associated to Jesus. It's something that Jesus is said to have preached. And it is essentially prayer and charity. And those two things are sort of the most simple, and it says to establish prayer because of how prayer connected the community, what sort of role it had, in that time, and also it also talked about they talk about that in Surah Jumu'ah, and then zakat, which I've heard people explain, but I've heard people tell me that Muslims have taught me through YouTube that the literal meaning of zakat means to purify. So it's not, there's certain concepts of the Quran that just can't be translated. They have to be studied. And one explanation I heard was that when someone gives to others, that it purifies. It's almost like an act of purification. You're purifying yourself, because maybe you would use those resources for something bad. And so let's see, Oh man. See, I'm probably not the best person to explain this. There's probably people who are healthier, smarter, but there's things that I feel like I know that I want to share with the world and take the risk, given my condition. And I'm a privileged person, so I have less risk than someone else. And hopefully you're watching this part of the video because I don't want you to get hurt by sharing my beliefs. And it's important to study, so I recommend going and studying for yourself and getting this information. But basically, as I've explained it in a lot of other videos, it's just that I think that what all of this literature is trying to do is to teach us about that there's a force behind the world. This is something that was observed, yet it takes faith to know that it exists. And so we observe it because everything is moving, everything is living. So there has to be something causing it to move, something causing it to live. And that was taught to me by a Jewish person from Tel Aviv, who I chatted with, and they taught me that the word El in Hebrew can also mean to or towards. So that's kind of where, and then I started to see how that gets repeated in popular literature and movies, and when people talk about the force. And I think that word is pretty accurate in describing it. And so it is, yes, it's like a force, and it's moving everything. It's hidden, we can reason it, but to a certain extent it can be reasoned away. And so it does require faith. And especially when there's difficult things in life, and we don't understand its will, or we're misguided because of things that we're taught. And for example, how to be grateful. So that's another message of the Prophet Muhammad that is really important, is being grateful. And so, because the message of Jesus created this surplus, it created people who are creating a lot of wealth and a lot of life for people. And I think that it was there had to come a prophet to kind of utilize that and understand that. And I think that is an important aspect in it, and it's really important to the United States and all these other wealthy countries that are suffering from a lot of things that false wealth can bring. And so this force, it's one. It's not divided. It's not associated with another thing. And so that's been a difficult thing to keep. And because of the problem of evil. And so we associate entities with evil, when we really should be fearing the one, and worshiping it, because it is the thing that gives life. And if it really was if we focus on all that evil and aren't grateful for the good, then it can really feel bad. But if we observe, there's reason behind calling it merciful, the most merciful, and calling it love, and calling it all these good things because the world exists, it's thriving, and it thrives even more when we learn that we are also forces. We are just mortal forces. We are not the one force, but we are forces. And we are acting upon this world. And so how we act, if it reflects the nature of the Creator, then we create. But if it acts in opposition to things, it destroys. And so there needs to be a balance, and that is, I think, why Islam is called Islam, is because it's of that balance. Many people like me at some point in their journey look towards religions that are in the Orient, in Eastern Asia, and I think that when I think of the word salam or shalom, I think of yin and yang. Because I think of the letter of fire, shin or sin, and the letter of water. And the balance between them both. And so that brings about peace. And if you think about the universe is a really destructive place. There's quasars, there's black holes, there's supernovas, there's all these things. I mean, we could just easily be, especially our electrical infrastructure, the sun could easily just wipe that out. They monitor that all the time. So we are so protected, so mysteriously, and everything is just so, they call it the Goldilocks. And so I think that we're also a part of that. We are the Goldilocks, and so just acknowledging it and sort of living a sort of a Goldilocks lifestyle to maintain and sustain our existence, I think that's what Islam is trying to teach. And I'm not I try to follow the simple religion, and even so, I don't do it as rigorously as some other people do, and I do it alone because I don't want to argue with people, and I don't want to be hurt by people who disagree with me. And so, but I wanted to share this because I don't want to hide the truth. I don't think it's important to hide our beliefs and hide the observations we make, or to cover them, to deny them. And so this is my attempt to contribute, and it's thanks to all the people in my life, and especially Allah, and that I hope that this information can support and give life to all the Muslims who are struggling, and give so that the Christians and the Jewish people and the Hindu and all these other people around them can give them sympathy and learn to give them life too, and so that we can all prosper, and in a good, balanced way, and in a truthful way. Peace.